afternoon session, moderated by Dan Soros, will go much more into the history of blues work with dance in, I think, the session in New York in the 30s and 40s. So in this session, I want to avoid so much the historical aspects, but to deal more in the realm of the philosophical, theoretical, and practical nature of creating music, and sometimes not, in relation to the dance. So I'd like to take some steps, kind of bring ourselves back and think a lot about how music is created, and of course, also we will talk about music in relation to the dance. Now, before I start out with any questions, I don't know if any of you have anything to say about that sort of long or I'll just start out. I know Lou Harrison is at the moment writing a piece for Morris.
Finished it.
And I thought maybe you could just talk a little about that to get us rolling. How you started your conversations with Mark Mills. You just came up with the title for it.
Yes, I was just told that the putative title is Rhymes with Silver. I have no idea what it means. But at any rate, Mark asked me to write a piece for him. And I was happy to do that because he's, I think, a magnificent choreographer and magnificent dancer. And also, he's a trained musician. And that makes things a lot easier for a composer. At the same time, I didn't want to dominate the scene, so to speak. So the first thing I did for him was a kit. Oh, when we had a meeting, he came down, I think with Barry, I'm not sure, at any rate, to our house. And we talked about the question of the commission and what was it to consist in. Well, he didn't have a story, he didn't have a line, he didn't have anything about it. And I didn't either. So we decided actually that I was just going to go along and compose. And if I had any suggestions about the choreography, fine. And if he thought of anything about the music, fine. So we just do that. There was only one stipulation, and that was that I write for Yo-Yo Ma, which proved to be difficult because I'm not accustomed to writing for superstars. And so what do you do? Well, I wrote a lot of music for Mark Morris, a lot of it, one after the other, working up courage to write for Yo-Yo Ma, which I then finally embarked on and turned out a four-movement suite specifically for him. And of course, it scared everybody. I was really scared. So I sent him a movement, and I asked him what I was doing was okay. There were a few risks, as a matter of fact, which I knew about on the cello, and I took them, and that was one of the reasons I had to know. And he immediately said, "It's perfectly good for the cello, it's fine, thank you." And so that was okay. And so I could go on to do the rest of that thing. Well, there are four movements, and I believe in recent publicity that those have been detached and constitute now a suite. Whether that's the title for that suite or the rest of it, I don't know. But I started out with, and I ended up with, a practice that I had, in effect, learned from Henry Powell, which is a kit. I've done several of these, and the musical kits consist of maybe lines of melodies and lines of rhythm. But they share the same rhythmic structure, but you can mix them up. You can play melody number 1 with rhythmic line number 8 or something like that. And also some of them will connect very easily, the melodies, and some of the rhythms too. Some of them show great contrast as well. he's also built a multitude of other instruments, various different things, great help. And of course, special things. If I need a special sound, I ask Bill to try for it. Sometimes I go out and start an instrument, and he comes out and takes over.
Yeah, I met Lou 30 years ago, and found he was building instruments, and I thought,
that means different formations too. And then again, I really don't know these instruments, and I do know the basic tuning of the pipa, and that means I can figure out imaginarily, because I have touched instruments, I can figure out what would work by both drones and by chordal schemes, and what could be gone across this way and so on. I'm in no sense a pipa virtuoso, I can imagine. And so I'm in the process of doing that. I have no problem with the string orchestra because I've written for it before. And my own problem there is not to overwhelm the pipa. Again, it's a matter of balance. And thinking of tone colors that will mix or alter in some way the string orchestra or play with it. Well, the one thing I don't like about the pipa is the continuous tremolo, just continuous. And I thought, well, I could be avant-garde and ask her to play E flat for 15 minutes or something, you know. But I decided no. And then suddenly it dawned on me from my own Western background, the Neapolitan mandolin does that all the time. So I put in my bits and pieces a very short piece, which is like a Neapolitan piece, like a tenor singing, and it's to be done that way all the way through. So it's called Neapolitan too. So that at least solves that problem for me. Now I can go on and be more adult about it. I hope.
Thank you. Could you describe this kit notion or in more detail?
The question is asking Lou to describe the kit notion
Yes.
in more detail.
Well, yes. This came from the fact that I knew and loved a dancer who was a Bharatanatyam dancer. And she danced to tals, of course, and made her own rhythms with the feet and with her gestures, mudra, and so on. But I long wanted to write a piece for her. I couldn't think of a way of doing it because I'm not experienced in an Indian musician. But finally it dawned on me one time that I could make an artificial tone, or just simply make a succession of rhythms that were interesting, and then write them down the page like this, also they're all the same, and then make the melody. And I chose, as a matter of fact, that half note, whole note motor, 8-note motor, and wrote all of them in the same motor, of course. And some of them have tunes of different kinds in different registers. One of them goes up all the way to the flute, goes all the way up to the top, and another one comes down from the top too, so that they can be connected in this way. Many of the tunes can be repeated on 2 or 3 levels too. And then I wrote for percussion an abstract, I'll say 3 or 4 lines, and I think I asked for tambourines in the top 2 and simply drums for the bottom 2. And this is for single percussions. And it also conforms to the same tone, so to speak, the same rhythmical structure. Any one of the melodies can be repeated or connected with any one of the other of them. And also the same thing is true of the percussion. And they can also be omitted or repeated in any order. Well, the dancer organized a piece out of that. Actually, there was a beginning piece because I called it Ariadne. And it was Ariadne abandoned, and that's a solo like an Indian piece. And then the chalas or the tal starts. And the flute player and dancer organized what they wanted, and particularly the dancer, of course, because she was shaping the choreography. And so she decided, I'll have that one, this one, following, and the percussion will be quiet here, and get excited here, and so on. This was all provided for everybody. And so it's been done a number of times. It's coming up being done. It's been recorded 2 or 3 times in different versions too. And I think it's fun, and I learned that kind of hit behavior from Henry Cowell, who did it another way, but still it's the basic idea. Yeah.
How many alternatives do you give the flute player or the percussionist?
In that piece, I think it's 8 each. And so that gives you a lot of combinations. It's either separately. And for Mark's actual piece too.
Didn't Henry Call have a name for this thing? He had a sort of system. I remember reading
He calls it elastic board.
Elastic Form,
And
that's right.
he did one for Martha Graham, and I think he did also one for Marion Van Kyle. And I happened to help organize one of them. He was in prison at the time, and he sent us this kit. So I organized it.
Does your variation of the kit, how does it differ from his Elastic Form?
Well, it's the same thing, only he wrote for Barry Van Kyle. He wrote, I think, two actual pieces. One is blues and one is something else. And then he gave me chords, little melodicals, rhythmicals, and so on, and asked me to assemble these, which I did, and including the fixed pieces. So the whole thing was, in effect, an elastic form. I think the ones that he did for Martha Graham are written out, say, three-part counterpoint. This is all printed up in one of these musicological studies. At any rate, then you could say you could go from this measure to measure 12, or like that. And you can contract and expand these by that method. So that's another way of doing elastic.
That gives the dancer some, or the choreographer
Yes,
some,
exactly.
some input into the way the music
Right.
is constructed for it. Richard, you had a question?
Yeah, that highlights maybe a need for new forms when we collaborate. I know I was trained in the music conservatory, music-oriented only. When I began to collaborate with dancers, I didn't know how that was going to work. Was I going to write the music? In some cases, I took a finished dance, I notated it rhythmically, and made notes of the match. I tried every approach I could. And I wonder that we don't maybe need new forms where the dancers get that sort of interactive input. And I think we all probably struggle with that a little bit. And I wanted to ask about Chinner Young, if you collaborated with dancers, and what kind of processes have worked for you?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Richard said, to make sure you all heard that, is in response to the elastic form of the kit, that as dance proposers, we may need to come up with some new forms that give a little more flexibility to both choreographer and dancer. And then his question was to Chinner Young, whether he had collaborated with choreographers and how he worked with them.
I had done some collaborative work with choreographers and dancers a while back when I used to live in DLC. But one particular piece that I still remember is that the choreographer came, we had a talk, had a discussion, and she asked me if I would be so willing to write a piece. So I said, when's the deadline? She said, next week. And I was very calm. I was very calm. I said, could you give me then 3 days to think it over? So I said, if you can afford that, sure. And so, and I did. It took like 2 or 3 days, and then we got together the second time. And then I went ahead, I said, okay, let's do it. And then that morning, I remember in Soho, with me, I had a percussionist, just a percussion, one player on the percussionist, myself, and a lot of drums and percussion instruments and all that. We moved it upstairs. Upstairs. And then the choreographer was there, and dancers, and none of us had nothing. We had nothing at all to start with. So we started from sort of ground zero type. And we came up with like a 20-minute piece, 3 movement. The one thing that really, if we want to be a little more technical about it, the piece consists of 3 movements, and the percussion is just carried 3 sheets of paper and basically graphical type of
was going on all the time. I faced, I see Mark Morris dancing. And when the piece felt complete, and I completed also doing what the only thing he actually asked me to do was to write for Yo-Yo Ma. And when I written in a lot of music that I thought was appropriate and felt right, and then also the movements were balanced, and then finished the section for Yo-Yo Ma, it just felt complete. And they did too. They felt it. Yes, yeah, right.
So do you see movement as you write music for dance?
Often.
I was interested, you mentioned something about how your inspiration might come in the form of a dance gesture when you were talking about that empty space and receiving hints. If a hint comes to you in the form of
Well, and sure enough, the first piece we did with Carol and singing was like falling off the log. And October, as always, was right, of course. So there are surprises here. If you think of higher overtone combinations, for example, other peoples in various parts of the world have negotiated those maybe some time ago. And found them to be good or not good, as the case may be.
So if I can just ask another question for you, when you write the scales for specific instruments, I understand how that would work, but say you were composing for a violin, so do you approach it from that aspect as far as composing a piece for traditional Western instruments, continental play, particular microphone melodies?
Yes, well, thank you. I've written and have become very well known for using Western soloists with gamelan of other tunings and in different ways. But the reason for this is that it is, for some Western instruments, for example, a valve instrument, you can adjust those valves to particular pitches in the gamelan, and then all they have to do is press them and out it comes. But the violin is another matter. It has to go through the ear and then come out in the fingers. Now, I have, to my surprise, found that that is easier, for the most part, for Americans, and at least the Americans I know. They listen, they finger, and they play it. And sometimes that's pretty complex when I'm asking. Also, I have asked, for example, in a score of mine, for solo violin with the C. Betty Slendro, I've asked for the accidentals between the wide instruments, wide intervals. For example, between the 7 to 6, I've asked for a sharp in there. And my soloist got exactly the right one. And so it's the ear and the coordination between the ear and in this instance. The French horn, again, is vowels. The viola is in the ear. What else am I written for? Piano, you just tune the piano. Yes, well, a friend of mine did the trombone, and yes, that's perfectly possible, it's been done. And the piano, you just tune to the piano.
About the reeds,
Huh?
on the reeds.
Yes, the saxophone can do that, and yes, I've written a lascivious piece for a saxophone with the fellow of Sibelius and also Mills Gamelan. In fact, a reviewer said that it gave an attractive wash of the cadence to that part of the concert.
Yes, Africa.
Yes, I heard, I think I attended a workshop somewhere, I don't remember where it was, where there was supposed to be a disparity
said, Balinese? You see? I said, because the Balinese like about 7 per, whereas in Java it's 3 maybe. And, yeah, it can be controlled, but I've never been raised. By the way, there is a passage in Antile's music book, I forgot what it's called, or Antile's book, in which he relates musical patterns to general rhythms. without you in the ballroom.